Hello everyone and welcome back. Since the movie Nun came out a few days ago, I still haven't watched it by the way, I decided to do a video about the 5 true paranormal cases investigated by Ed and Lorraine Warren. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment. Before we begin, I just wanted to let you know that I have uploaded a new video on my Patreon page with scary stories to help you sleep. And the amazing thing is that this video is free for everyone to watch. You can follow the link below, and if you do, don't forget to leave a comment there too. With that being said, get ready, grab your flashlight, and follow me into the darkness. The Perron family haunting. Ed Warren was a World War II vet and former police officer who became a self-professed demonologist after studying the subject on his own. His wife, Lorraine, claimed to be a clairvoyant and medium who was capable of communicating with the demons that Ed discovered. In 1952, Ed and Lorraine founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, the oldest ghost hunting group in New England. They quickly gained notoriety as respected paranormal investigators after their initial investigation of the Amityville hauntings. Their 2 most famous cases, however, were heavily popularized by the Conjuring franchise, a series of movies that focuses on Ed and Lorraine's experiences exorcising demons from 2 possessed families. The true story of The Conjuring remains almost unbelievably chilling to this day. The true story begins with the first film, which focuses on the Perron family. In January of 1971, Roger and Carolyn Perron moved their family, including their 5 young daughters, to their new 200-acre home in Harrisville, Rhode Island, and they were unaware of its allegedly insidious former resident. Originally built in 1736, the country home was once inhabited by Bathsheba Thayer and her 4 children, 3 of whom died young. Despite the era's high infant mortality rates, those deaths and the circumstances around them roused suspicion within the town, resulting in the ostracism of Thayer. Labeled a Satanist by her community members, she allegedly hung herself in the backyard, while the Perron family lived in their home. Numerous pleasant ghostly interactions, like spirits playing with the children or helping to do chores, were reported. But so were darker interactions from ghosts like Thayer's, who took on a more menacing presence in the home. It started small. Carolyn would notice that the broom went missing or seemed to move from place to place on its own. She would hear the sound of something scraping against the kettle in the kitchen. When no one was in there, she'd find small piles of dirt in the center of a newly cleaned kitchen floor. The girls began to notice spirits around the house, though for the most part they were harmless. There were a few, however, that were angry. The spirit that was depicted in the film, Bathsheba, was the worst of them all. Whoever the spirit was, she perceived herself to be mistress of the house, and she resented the competition my mother posed for that position, said Andrea Perron, the oldest of the 5 girls. According to Andrea, the family experienced other spirits as well that smelled like rotting flesh and would cause beds to rise off the floor. She claims her father would enter the basement and feel the cold, stinking presence behind him. They often stayed away from the dirt-floored cellar, but the heating equipment would often fail mysteriously, causing Roger to venture down. Over the 10 years that the family lived in the house, the Warrens made multiple trips to investigate. At one point, in 1974, Lorraine conducted a séance to attempt to contact the spirits that were possessing the family. During the séance, Carolyn Perron became possessed, speaking in tongues and rising from the ground in her chair. Andrea claims to have secretly witnessed the séance. "I thought I was going to pass out," Andrea said. My mother began to speak a language not of this world, in a voice not her own. Her chair levitated, and she was thrown across the room. After the seance, Roger kicked the Warrens out, worried about his wife's mental stability. According to Andrea, the family continued to live in the house due to financial instability until they were able to move in 1980, at which point the spirits were silenced and the hauntings ceased. The Enfield Haunting. 6 years after the Perron family was terrorized by their demon, another family in Enfield, England began to experience similar things. In August of 1977, the Hudson family started seeing and hearing strange things. Janet, who was 11 at the time, recalled sitting up in bed to see her dresser slide across the room that she shared with her brother. "We shouted, 'Mom, Mom!' said Janet. We were sort of frightened, but also intrigued." Later, the family began to hear knocking coming from all sorts of places in the house. She remembers her mother thinking there were burglars or drifters hiding out in their home and calling the police to investigate. The officer who arrived reported witnessing a chair rise up and move across the floor on its own. Reporters from the Daily Mirror, who were also called in to report on the Enfield haunting, experienced them for themselves too. Legos and marbles were reported flying around the room, hot to the touch when picked up. Clothing folded on tabletops would slip off of them and fly across the room. The sound of dogs barking would be heard in empty rooms. Lights would flicker, coins would drop out of thin air, and furniture would spin or tip over without being touched. Then one day, the iron fireplace in upstairs bedroom was ripped out of the wall. After that, paranormal investigators from all around the world showed up, claiming to be able to contact spirits and wanting to know more about the Enfield haunting. Most of them decided that the children had been faking their experiences, as one of them had admitted to doing so on one occasion. But the Warrens were different. They showed up and immediately believed that a demonic presence was present. This is where the story differs from the movie, as there was no exorcism like practiced from the Warrens. In 1979, 2 years after they began, the hauntings abruptly stopped, though the family maintains they did nothing to stop them. Annabelle the Door. In 1970, a mother purchased an antique Raggedy Ann doll from a hobby store. The doll had been a birthday present for her daughter Donna. Donna was preparing to graduate from college with a nursing degree. She lived in a tiny apartment with her roommate Angie. Donna placed the doll on her bed as a decoration and didn't give it a second thought. Within days, both Donna and Angie noticed that there appeared to be something very strange and creepy about the doll. The doll mysteriously seemed to move about the house, relatively small movements at first, such as change in position, but as time passed, the movement became more noticeable. Donna and Angie would come home to find the doll in a completely different room. Sometimes, the doll would be found with legs crossed, arms folded. Other times, it would be found upright, standing on its feet. Annabelle the Door not only moved but could write as well. About a month into their experiences, Donna and Angie began to find messages on parchment paper that read, "Help us" and "Help Lou." The handwriting as if written by a small child. One night, Donna came home to find the doll had moved again. This time, it was on her bed. Donna had come to find that this was typical of the doll, but somehow, she knew this time was different. Something wasn't right. A sense of fear came over her when she inspected the doll and saw what looked like blood drops on the back of his hands and its chest. Seemingly from nowhere, a liquidy red substance had appeared on the doll. Scared and desperate, Donna and Angie decided It was time to seek expert advice. Donna was then introduced to the spirit of Annabelle Higgins. Annabelle was a young girl that resided on the property before the apartments were built. They were happy times. She was a young girl of only 7 years old when her lifeless body was found in the field upon which the apartment complex now stands. They were to soon find out, however, that Annabelle was not what she appeared to be. Lou was friends with Donna and Angie and had been with them since the day the doll arrived. Lou had never been fond of the doll. Preparing for a road trip, Lou and Angie were reading over maps alone in her apartment. The apartment seemed eerily quiet. Suddenly, rustling sounds coming from Donna's room aroused fear that someone had possibly broken into the apartment. Lou, determined to figure out who or what was it, quickly made his way to the bedroom door. He waited for the noises to stop before entering and turning on the light. The room was empty except for Annabelle, who was tossed on the floor in the corner. Lou scrubbed the room for forced entry, but nothing was out of place. But as he got close to the door, he got the distinct impression that somebody was behind him. Spinning around, he was quick to realize that nobody else was there. Then in a flash, he found himself grabbing for his chest, doubled over, cut and bleeding. His shirt was stained with blood, and upon opening his shirt, 7 distinct claw marks, 3 vertically and 4 horizontally. All were hot like burns. These scratches healed almost immediately, half gone the next day, fully gone by day 2. After Lou's experiences, Donna felt it was time to seek real expert advice and contacted an Episcopal priest named Father Higgin. Father Higgin felt it was a spiritual matter and felt he needed to contact a higher authority in the church, so he contacted Father Cook, who immediately contacted the Warrens. Ed and Lorraine Warren immediately took interest in the case and contacted Donna concerning the doll. The Warrens, after speaking with Donna, Angie, and Lou, came to the immediate conclusion that the doll itself was not in fact possessed, but manipulated by an inhuman presence. At the conclusion of the investigation, the Warrens felt it appropriate to have a recitation of an exorcism blessing by Father Cook to cleanse their apartment. Father agreed to perform the exorcism. Warrens were confident the entity would no longer reside there. They agreed to take the rag doll back home with them. The Warrens had a special case built for Annabelle inside the Occult Museum, where she resides to this day. Since the case was built, Annabelle no longer appeared to move, but she is thought to be responsible for the death of a young man who came to the museum on motorcycle with his girlfriend. The South and Werewolf, perhaps one of the more unusual cases from Ed and Lorraine Warren's case list. This investigation took the Warrens out of the US to a seaside town in Essex, England. There, a man by the name of Bill Ramsey was believed to be possessed by a demon that manifested as a wolf. Growing up, Ramsey was a normal, happy boy. One day, though, at the young age of 9, he suddenly began exhibiting inhuman qualities. Reportedly, while playing outside in his backyard, Ramsey felt a frigid cold overtake him, and his nostrils were overcome with an awful stench before he flew into a rage. Uprooting a fence post and gnawing on its wire meshing, Ramsey eventually grew up, became a loving husband and father of 3, and was incident-free until the 1960s. The early years of his marriage were plagued by nightmares, cold sweats, and waking up to the pants of a wild animal, which he soon realized were coming from him. In the 1980s, would repeatedly feel overcome by the sensations he had as a child, while hanging out with friends, and even once while doing a citizen's arrest. At one point, he attacked a friend in a car on their way from a pub. In the midst of this, Ramsey spent several stints in the hospital, all featuring the same symptoms of rage, inhuman strength, bare teeth, growling, hunched shoulders, and hands curled like claws. In an interview with the Warrens, about their experience with Ramsay, Ed Warren stated that Ramsay would ask to be locked up in a jail cell for his protection and the protection of the public. When the Warrens got wind of Ramsay's situation, they asked him to their Connecticut home, where Bishop Robert McKenna would perform a recorded exorcism of Ramsay. The Amityville Case. On November 13, 1974, in the small town of Amityville, New York, Ronald DeFeo burst into Harry's bar and screamed that his parents had been shot and killed. Police discovered the bodies of 6 members of the DeFeo family. The father, mother, and 4 of the 5 DeFeo children were found, face down, shot in the back of their heads. Ronald claimed he wasn't home during the murders after police officers found a gun case for a .35 caliber Marlin rifle in Ronald's room. DeFeo confessed. But there never has been a solid explanation of how one person acting alone could take the lives of 6 family members in the dead of night, 3:15 a.m., and no one heard the shots being fired. On December 18, 1975, the Lutz family moved into the DeFeo home, never expecting they'd have to leave it all behind 28 days later. From the very first night they moved in, the family claimed they felt strange sensations. Within days, the family's personality had drastically changed. George was plagued by a constant chill and spent all his time feeding the fireplace. George also noticed a change in his grooming habits, and his and Kathy's health declined drastically. The largest daughter began spending all of her time in her room playing with an imaginary friend she described as red-eyed pig called Jody. Jody also claimed she could not be seen by anyone else until she wanted to. Mysterious foul odors would emanate from different locations of the house. Black stains appeared on the toilets and ceramic fixtures. Kathy was touched by an unseen force, and a green gelatin substance would appear throughout the house. Hundreds of flies appeared in the sewing room despite it being the dead of winter. George would wake up nightly at 3:15 a.m., which it was the same time the police felt the DeFeos were murdered. The Lutz family tried on numerous occasions to contact the Catholic priest, only to find the phones would cut out whenever they would try to call. After 28 days in the DeFeo home, the family claimed they could take no more. They grabbed only a few belongings and fled the house. 20 days after the largest fled, paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren were called in by Marvin Scott, a news reporter with Channel 5 New York, who had covered the Amityville story and worked on a prior investigation with the Warrens. A team of reporters, investigators, were assembled by Ed Warren and met at the home at 112 Ocean Avenue. The Lutz family refused to re-enter the home. During the investigation, Ed was physically pushed to the floor while using some religious provocation in the basement. Lorraine was also overwhelmed by the sense of a demonic presence and was plagued by her psychic impressions of the DeFeo family's bodies laid along the floor, covered in white sheets. The research team also captured an image of spirit that appeared as a little boy peering from the second floor. The land was also found to be used by John Ketchum. John Ketchum was a practicing black magician and had a cottage on the land prior to the construction of the Dutch colonial in 1924. John requested that his remains be buried on that property, and they remain there till this day. In a 2013 interview, Lorraine Warren said the Amityville house was the one case that haunts her the most. Amityville was horrible, she said during a press conference for The Conjuring. It was absolutely horrible. It followed us right across the country. I will never go in the Amityville house ever again. Hey there, and thank you so much for listening. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up. And if you like my videos and want to see more, subscribe to my channel. And I will see you all in my next video.